Mini episode 1379 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge, mini episode 1379. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here. And we have a review of the early part of the college football season and the NFL season for you today. We're going to take a look back at NFL Week 1 and the first 2 weeks of the college football season. We have a new FDH Lounge dignitary that we're welcoming to the program, Derek Joseph. And I want to take a minute here and just kind of set this because it was a little bit of a surprise to me as I went back and looked how long it is since we've done this, because by my records, as I look at it, everybody that we've had for doing football, and football has been our most predominant subject here on the show where nothing is off topic. When we spun off of FantasyDraftHelp.com back in the day and we wanted to do a show where we would break down everything in the world like we do fantasy sports, inevitably sports were going to be a part of it, and outpacing the other areas out there, including TV and entertainment and other areas, including other sports and the news things when we get to them, is football. Football is the number one thing that we've done. And it's a very sacrosanct area to a lot of us with this program, and we take such great pride and joy in everything we've done with that. And everybody that we've got, this is really unbelievable to me, dates back to the old Sports Talk Network days, whether it's folks that I met there who were doing their own shows who came on board, or folks that I brought into the show when we were there. And you look at the original dignitaries at the time, Nate Noy, Tim Faust, Jason Jones, Chris Galloway. Now, Jason and Chris and I every year still do the NFL preview and review segments, and Galloway has done the divisional previews for me in recent years. We've done those in August, just did those recently. Joe Stazak, I just did a fantasy football segment with him last week. Always one of my favorite people in the world for having me on his show on 97.5 The Fanatic in Philadelphia as much as he has. What a great honor that's been. And his co-host on Callus Remarks podcast, Steve Callus. Kyle Ross, the great handicapper over the years, done more segments with him, I think, than anybody. The scout Ken Becks from FirstDownScouting.com. Fran Stuckberry from Our Sports Central. We've done a lot of college football with him, and also XFL, as that is a passion of his. Just did a college football preview with him recently. Russ Cohen from Sportsology. We've done more hockey and baseball with him than football, but he's been on for some football, and he's great at whatever he does. And Lloyd Carroll from the Queens Chronicle, who I would call him the biggest character in the New York sports media, but that would be selling him short. He's the biggest character in the New York media. And my condolences for anybody that's ever had to stare down his questions at a press conference, but that's Lloyd for you. And this group is just really incredible, and it's a pleasure to be able to add to it today. And as is often the case with the people that I've surrounded myself with, it's really just kind of serendipity as far as how it comes to be. So the aforementioned Russ Cohen from Sportsology, so key, and I, of course, with the FDH Lounge and FantasyDraftHelp.com, us two sort of at the middle of this. We've co-promoted a great number of things, including our draft guides that we do every year under the banner of the 21st Century Media Alliance. And that is an overhang that we've used to promote a bunch of projects publicly. But then there's sort of a parallel effort behind the scenes as far as just trying to get to know good people, do some good networking. And it's amazing the number of things over the years that have flowed from that, and that you're looking in one direction and you end up having something in another direction that ends up dropping into your lap. And so, too, that was the case here, because last winter, I came to be very impressed with a very, very excellent writing operation under the banner of a very talented woman by the name of Maya Master. And you can find her on Twitter at Chaotic Goodest. And if you do that, I really urge you to go to her link tree, because that's where you can kind of get a look at the whole operation there. She's somebody that is going to be really, really big in a number of different areas, but I think certainly health and wellness among them. Recommend her books highly, Until You Make It, On the Rocks, and Everything I Didn't Say. And it was in the course of getting to know about her operation and be very impressed with it that I got to know Derek, because if you follow Meyer's Twitter feed, then you would be, again, if not familiar with Derek under the name Derek, you'll know who I'm talking about. But somebody who is very, very instrumental in being a good stabilizing balance, I think, personally and professionally, and any kind of operation, no matter the amount of talent that's involved in it, you have to have somebody like Derek in the mix, a good analytical mind to kind of help keep things moving forward and be an excellent sounding board and source of advice. And in the course of getting to know them, this came about as far as having Derek on the program, since he is very much interested in the world of handicapping, particularly with football. I will say that Derek already and Maya were kind enough to help me with one of my behind-the-scenes projects that I've been working on. Not a public-facing project today. Hopefully it's something that will be public-facing at some point, but they gave me very good advice and feedback. And you can find Derek on Twitter at dude_Cav. And that is, I know from his Twitter page here, it's a different kind of Cav than I'm wearing my Cleveland Cavs shorts and t-shirt
not the
today.
Cavaliers.
Yes, it's not the Cavaliers. It's not my Cavs that I am so beloved of, but it's a different kind. And you get some insights into his mind there as well, and his way of thinking about things. So, Derek, with all that being said, with that lengthy EFIS pitch wind up out of the way, it's a pleasure to have you on the show here, and I'm looking forward to breaking down some football with you.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. Great. You compared Maya, who's, had this very successful career filled with all these different, writings and other stuff. And then you jumped at me and it's, you got Derek who, he supports her. No, but in all seriousness, it's awesome. And, I'm just happy to be here, be able to talk about, something I love and passionate about, and, something that, is sports, and specifically football, and specifically a sport that I have no business giving takes on, but, much like 99% of sports media, I'm just going to give probably very invalid and inexperienced opinions, but, got to get those clicks.
I'm sure that will not be the case. And by the way, if that was the way that I referred to you, Derek, join the club, right? Because for me, you, everybody else in the Media Alliance here, there's all of us, and then there's her with what she's got going on here. So as I look around the figurative landscape of my cohorts in the 21st Century Media Alliance, people that I've done stuff with, whatever, you're in very good company, all of us being in her shadow, my friend.
No, absolutely. She's a rock star.
Absolutely. One of a kind, truly. And in looking at the season thus far, I'm going to start NCAA. And I know from Twitter, I know from checking, it was either, it blurs together between things you've tweeted out or things that she's retweeted. But I know for a fact you were on Georgia in the Georgia-Clemson game, and you were on Ohio State in the Ohio State-Oregon game. I lost on both of those. Those are ones where I want to talk about this as a concept. And a lot of times on this show, we'll sort of make these cross-sport analogies. I go back a couple of years when I was doing our Stanley Cup predictions on the site, and I think that year I also got in a friend's bracket contest as well. And I remember looking at the stats, and this might have been maybe 2017, and it was St. Louis, Chicago in the first round. And you're just tempted at that point to pencil in Chicago because St. Louis never got past Chicago. And then I'm looking at it and like, but the stats say this is their year. This is their year. And it brings me to the concept that something's always true until it isn't. I got that one right. Yeah. And I remember the things that I got right more often than things I got wrong, because usually I get it wrong like most people. Usually I get it wrong.
Oh, absolutely. I've been doing the same thing this season. I have been since week 0, actually. I have been on the UCLA train. I think UCLA. I think you have Chip Kelly. Oh my God, almost blanked out on his name. You have Chip Kelly back in the Pac-12 with a vengeance, and I think that team is going to surprise a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as, you're talking about both Oregon and Georgia. Before we go to Georgia, I'll just talk about Oregon. I think the Pac-12 is going to be, this is kind of like the coming out party of the Pac-12, because
right.
you finally have Oregon back since the Chip Kelly Mariota days,
mm-hmm.
who just dethrones Ohio State, and then you have UCLA, who's just hiding in the back, knocking people out. And I think those two teams are going to meet in the conference championship, and if we don't see Oregon in the playoffs, I think UCLA is the reason why.
Well, it's not likely to be Washington based on what we saw of them the other night, but
no.
And those games, the reason I bring them up together is it seems like it's one of these things where, again, something is true until it isn't. And I go back to that St. Louis-Chicago thing in the Stanley Cup playoffs where, again, I happened to sit down, I put the work in, I was looking at it, and the numbers convinced me that it was St. Louis's year to get past Chicago, even though I risked being ridiculed for that. But again, I fell back in these two games on the whole thing that the public generally does, because you look at Georgia, which has been basically operating at the level of a rich man's Mark Richt the last couple of years. It looked like they were poised to take that next step that they hadn't taken with Kirby Smart, but then they've plateaued there. And then with Oregon, like you said, the last couple of years in the Pac-12, whoever the best team is, they're not going to win their big intersectional games. So it's that whole thing that something is always true until it isn't. And I'm going to give you credit for at least going 1 for 2 on that, because you were on Georgia on that one there, in a spot where there were a lot of us saying there's no way that Dabo Swinney's not going to pull a rabbit out of the hat here. And when it came right down to it, there was no rabbit to pull out.
No, yeah, I think we're now used to and almost, numb to this college football playoff paradigm where it's every year it's going to be, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and, whoever the fourth contender is, whether it be Notre Dame, Oklahoma, or whatever, but we all know it's probably going to be one of those top three.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look, Clemson had two very dominant quarterbacks with Trevor Lawrence and before him Deshaun Watson. I didn't feel that with DJ. I'm not even going to try and butcher his last name.
Good for you.
Uwelewe. But I really didn't feel that he was going to have that same spark that Trevor and Deshaun did. And then while Georgia, I think, I don't know. I do a lot of gut checks when it comes to my picks and my takes. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm some analytics or stats guy. I'll check them every once in a while, but
sure.
I kind of just, use my gut, and it, some weeks it works, and then if you go to last week, in terms of my betting, it was the complete opposite. But just in terms of overall fandom, I just saw Georgia, being that team that's going to take it to Clemson, and I didn't think that Clemson team had it in them without Trevor, and I guess I was right.
Yeah. No, you got that one right. And, it's just really, really interesting. And maybe that'll be a lesson to a lot of us here, seeing that in back-to-back weeks here. The whole notion of just taking something for granted, the way that I think so many of us did, just going on the chalk in both of those games there. And when you were talking about perennial potential contenders for the playoffs, you mentioned Notre Dame. The aspect that I want to talk about with that is it's a very, very unique and very kind of 2021 kind of a deal there, as far as the Toledo game ending up on Peacock. And we've spent a tremendous amount of time on this show analyzing the streaming industry and different things going on with that. This is a thing where I'm looking at it like, if you're the Toledo coach, and I haven't heard this, but that had to be bulletin board material, because this is the updated version of They Don't Respect You, of he had to be in there like, listen, guys, there's no way the USC game would be on Peacock. I don't think they play Clemson this year, but there's no way the Clemson game would be on Peacock. North Carolina, they put the game on Peacock that they thought they could get away with. That if people missed the game, at least they're missing an easy win. No big deal. I'll tune in next week. What does that make you feel, guys? If you're the Toledo coach, you got to be playing that card. And it was just very, very fascinating as they came so close to pulling off the upset there. That was what kept going through my mind, was those players had to be out there pissed off. They're playing Notre Dame at Notre Dame, but they're not on national TV. They've been relegated to the paywall. It is no respect, basically. I mean, if the coach said that, he wouldn't be too far off, because that's what it is. So it's a fascinating dynamic, I think, on how the business of college football can affect what happens on the field there, because there's no way that didn't give extra motivation to the Rockets out there.
And we've seen that a couple times, actually. I remember in I believe it was 18, when Army played Oklahoma, and it wasn't on it was behind a paywall. I think it was on. It wasn't big. It was some Oklahoma pay-per-view almost.
Oh, wow!
You had to buy it like it was a boxing match. And if you remember that game, Army took Oklahoma to 2 overtimes.
Yeah.
They ultimately lost, but that was a near, and that was Kyler Murray's Oklahoma, where they didn't go to the playoffs like Baker's team did.
Right.
But that was still a dominant Oklahoma team that had a great year. And a service academy takes them to 2 overtimes and almost beats them. So I mean, we definitely. I mean, I didn't even think about that with the Toledo game, but I mean, that might be a factor to consider when handicapping teams is getting taking the limelight away. Is that gonna affect those players on the underdog side?
Yeah, I mean, and that's an excellent point on your part, because I didn't even remember that. With that, I can understand with one of the teams being involved why you remember that game, but that is. I wonder about that. I wonder about the commonality of that, and as we see this more and more over a period of time, and it's just interesting, like how many people were having to shell out the $5 over the weekend that didn't already have it. Now, a number of people, like my brother, lives in an area, and he's a Notre Dame alum, and he tries not to ever miss a game. Now, he lives in a Comcast household, so I guess they get Peacock for free. I've already had Peacock, so it's one of these things where it was no big deal. I don't think I even bothered watching any of it, although I could have. But, you see it more and more where it really just pisses people off to such a great degree. If you think back during the Olympics, the Team USA basketball games, I think the first one on an early Sunday morning, I was on Twitter and I saw Peacock trending. I'm like, what's this about? Well, it was everybody in the world pissed off that they didn't have it there. It's really funny is that, like, Peacock's run all these ads over a period of time. It's free, it's free, it's free. It's like, that is super misleading, because so much of their stuff's behind the paywall. You wanted to watch Team USA basketball in real time, it was behind the paywall. You wanted to watch the Notre Dame game, it was behind the paywall. So I think they've cut down on the whole free thing over a period of time, because somebody probably got in their ear and said there's probably a lawsuit going at some point. But yeah, when you look at the growing might of ESPN Plus, with how many of the games have been behind the paywall there, they haven't gotten too many big ones there. But you raise an interesting point from a handicapping perspective, because I'm sure this is not going to be the last we've seen of this, the 2 examples we talked about.
No, absolutely. I mean, we see it as a lot of these these new services try to catch up with Netflix, and they don't have even like a catalog like a Disney that has everything, the top 5 grossing movies of all time.
Mm-hmm.
You have these Peacocks. I mean, Peacock would be broke if it wasn't for The Office. Let's be real. But
right.
I mean, that's 90% of the reason most people subscribe. But no, it will be interesting to see. I mean, I don't know. We obviously see this changing paradigm as the NCAA now loses power, and will probably, a lot of people, including myself, I mean, the NCAA is going to cease to exist besides just a very tiny governing body. They'll cease to exist with football now, that with the conferences, and now that NIL is a thing. I mean, we all probably saw that Dr. Pepper commercial 22 times that had DJ Ugalele, I know I'm butchering his name, but the Clemson quarterback in every single one. I mean, it's very jarring now to see college players in commercials. I mean, I'm happy for them. Obviously, it's a long time coming, but it's definitely changing the way we're gonna view this sport.
Absolutely, and when we did the college football coverage over the summer with the aforementioned Frank Stuckberry, we were talking about this, of what a revolutionary time it is in terms of name, image, likeness, the whole thing of where it might have stalled right now, but it looked like it was going to be a movement from 4 teams to 12 in the playoffs in the next couple of years. Plus, the next round of conference realignment and uber super conferences with Texas and Oklahoma moving to the SEC. So, 2021 is going to go down as one of the most consequential years in the history of college football, really regardless of anything else that happens this season.
Well, you brought up a great point about Texas. I think the biggest thing we learned, you said from the start, everything's true until it's not. Well, one thing, Texas is not back. We know that's true.
Right.
And it'll probably stay true for a while. Still getting blown out by a bottom tier SEC team. But no, it is going to be interesting. I think moving the playoffs bigger is something everybody wants, because, you had several years where you had a dominant, undefeated non-Power 5 team get pushed out for a Notre Dame or for, obviously Oklahoma's still dominant, but, 3 years ago, that UCF team with Scott Frost that went undefeated and beat, I think, Georgia in, not the Rose Bowl. They beat them in one of the New Year's Bowls, and then
That's
they
right.
also beat Auburn. That was a dominant team that a lot of people, including myself, think could have held its own in the playoffs. So I think they do need to expand it. And if it was up to me, I'd say, I don't know if I'd go to 12. I'd probably go to 8. I'd say you take the top 5, you take the Power 5 conference champs, and you have 3 wild cards, highest ranked teams that aren't in it. And that way you allow for those, the Cincinnati's, the UCS, or maybe a dominant SEC team that loses a close one to Alabama to still get in.
Well, I will freely admit once again, as I have previously on the show, to being the turd in the punch bowl in terms of everybody's playoff mania. I was calling for all those years the +1 when they were playing 2 championship teams in the game, the national championship game. Honestly, I love it the way that it is, because I do buy into the argument of the sanctity of the regular season, and even this +1 that we have now, this model of the 4-team playoff. You do lose at least a little bit, because it's not completely impossible that Clemson and or Ohio State worms their way back into this thing, versus back in the day that they would have been out. That was an eliminator game in the 2-team system in all likelihood, unless it's a year like 07 where I think a 2-loss LSU team gets in there. But again, that's where, mine is one of the most unpopular opinions in America, and that includes a wide swath of whatever political sayings that anybody might have. I think the guy who likes the 4-team playoff is the ultimate pariah in today's America, Derek.
Oh, for sure. But you do have to worry, especially now, like I said, as the Power 5, Power 5 conferences seize more power, or maybe even goes to 4 conferences. What is going to keep them in check from virtually guaranteeing that no outsider gets in? And I think that's been the problem with the four playoffs, is you will never have a Cincinnati or a UCF or what have you get in, because they won't allow it. The conferences want that money. I don't really blame them with the system, but a way to check that is to expand that playoff. I don't disagree that one of the more magical things about college football is the sanctity of the regular season. But it sometimes lends to very boring postseason games. I remember in 2013 when Notre Dame got in. I have a really good friend that went to Notre Dame, and I'll root for him when I'm hanging out with her. But God, I hate that team for what they made me sit through between the playoffs last year, where they get blown out, between their championship in 2013 when Alabama blew them out. It's just not fun football, because you're doing the guesswork rather than and I think there is some beauty to the magic of a wild card run. You look at these NFL teams that have done it. Those Giants teams that went all the way up and ended up dethroning Belichick and Brady. There's something beautiful to that, and I think that's why we love sports.
Well, I tell you what, and I'm sitting here pantomiming, figuratively pouring one out for my brother who was in the stands for that Alabama Notre Dame game, and just being miserable as hell down in, I think it was Miami that night. And my bro was not happy with how his Fighting Irish played in that one. But as far as, if you're going to be one of these kind of mid teams and make it into the playoffs, you got to be in a power conference. And that's where that leads me to, if there's been a team that's looked better thus far, and I'm not talking about just sheer dominance, although they've flashed it certainly in places here, but I mean in terms of who you went out and beat. Iowa, which was intermingled in a lot of the top 15 standings in the different polls and services here, with Indiana and Iowa State, going out there and beating both of them. Now, again, this is Kirk Ferentz, and Kirk Ferentz has got a Kirk Ferentz, so this will be a 9-3 team at the end, unless, again, to go back to our theme, unless this is the year that isn't the case. But as of right now, I mean, if you just look at quality wins, who's riding higher than the Hawkeyes?
No, I mean, that's definitely fair, but I think, I don't know. Iowa, their second win is against their rival. We know those are always interesting games. I had Iowa State in that one. I'm a real big idiot for that, but I don't disagree. I just, like you said, I see them falling off once we get towards the trail end of the season. I really do. I think you're gonna have a sneaky Pac-12 team, and I think that those Pac-12 teams are kind of the more really talented teams. I'm going to keep saying it. So in, come week 12, I can be like, I was right when UCLA sneaks in there after beating a dominant Oregon team.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a real clip and save prediction there, to be sure. As far as it goes with the Pac-12, before I circle around to the NFL here, I want to run this by you, and that being that going back to this was a feature that I had in our guide, Fantasy Football Draftology 2021, available on the main page at fantasydrafthelp.com. And of course, one of the features in there was a prediction about the college football landscape in 2025. And I got to tell you, I am buying on this notion of the Big Ten getting involved in doing the geographic located pods, meaning, stretching across the country here. So I have a Western pod as I look at the Big Ten in 2025. And this is going to hit home for you. Washington, Oregon, USC, and yes, Arizona State. Your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, that's sucking a lot of power from the Pac-12. I feel like, as the Pac-12 hasn't been that dominant in terms of championships. Mm-hmm. They just have it's still a very money-making conference, and they have a lot of those teams that just have those massive fan bases. So for those four schools to leave and go to a Big 12, I don't know. And if we expand the college playoffs, like a lot of people are talking about, and it goes to what I think they would do, which is the conference championships get an automatic bid. If I'm Oregon or I'm a dominant USC or UCLA, I don't want to risk going to the playoffs because I got to play Ohio State or maybe a resurgent Michigan. I don't see that happening. But
right.
It's one of these Big 12 teams. So I don't know. I think that'd be interesting, but seeing the Pac-12 seed power, I don't know. That's a lofty prediction.
Well, but here's the thing, though. Pac-12, I mean, let's be perfectly honest. Their TV deal, their network is a joke. The Big Ten network is an economic,
yes.
I would say engine, but that would be doing it short. Super engine, super collider, whatever you want to call it. For all the times that my dad, the old school Ohio State alum, has said to me, why do they have Rutgers and Maryland in there? I'm like, Dad, that opened up the whole East Coast. That's how the Big Ten network, took that huge jump forward here, because Maryland opens up the Beltway area, Rutgers opens up the NYC area, the entire Eastern Seaboard was opened up to the Big Ten network. And the Pac-10 network, Pac-12 network, that shows how old school I am to say Pac-10, but yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. They got to try and get on the level somehow of what the SEC and the Big Ten has, and that is very, very difficult at best.
Yeah, no, I'll buy that for $1. But I do want to bring up one wild card thing here.
Okay.
It isn't, not a lot of people are talking about, but some people are. How are you aware of this small FCS team, Presbyterian College, and what they're doing?
Okay. I'm not real familiar.
So Presbyterian College is a very small team. Their coach, I'd have to look up his name again. but he made his I don't want to say fortune. He made his career as a dominant high school coach. So he goes and becomes the head coach of this Presbyterian college.
Mm-hmm.
What he's doing is he has a very video game philosophy when it comes to playing football. And I shit you not, he only kicks onside kicks.
Wow.
He goes for fourth every time, and he goes for two every time. They've won their last two games, like I believe 84 to 40 something and 63 to 3.
Wow.
So it's a lot. I've seen a few people talk about this, and I'm sold now. If this team just dominates, and granted they're not playing anyone big, but if they run the table and win, these massive scores, who's to say in a couple years, maybe a smaller D1 school outside the Power 5 says, you know what, let's try this guy out, and they try it, and he can see success there, and now this could change the college football landscape as we know it. Now, this would never happen in the NFL, but imagine if in 10 years we're watching college football and we see someone do a regular kickoff, and we're like, what are they doing there? That's weird.
Right.
Just because everything's become this weird stuff. It's very fascinating, and it'd be a wild but super cool change if this guy could somehow make this work and sneak his way slowly into the mainstream college football.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's very interesting, because that seems like the kind of stuff that would be harder to pick apart than, I'm going to tell you something here from my alma mater, the old Harvard on the Hocking, Ohio University here. This is a story that gets handed down from generation to generation. So one of our star players who subsequently became a coach at the school, Cleve Bryant, who was just an awful head coach. And let me tell you about the idea that this particular frittata had that he thought was particularly smart, and that being, you would do, in lieu of an onside kick, he did it where it would be kicked high in the air to about the 45 or 50-yard line or whatever. And then as the guy's getting ready to catch the ball, once he catches it, you clobber him, you force a fumble. Teams started doing the fair catch on those ones here, and he kept doing it. He wouldn't let go of it. So, some of these gimmicks are just waiting to be exposed. The ones you're talking about, it seems like it might be a little harder to pick apart.
Yeah, no, I just think I think it would absolutely change it for anyone that's, I don't know how much experience you've had playing, like a Madden or an NCAA football video game, but that's, those annoying players you play are the people that do that. They're kicking on sides and stuff, and it works out for them, and they're not going off of conventional football strategy. It'd be just, wild to see that make it in the real thing. And I think it would definitely screw up. It would definitely lead to some interesting wins. Now, do I think this strategy could beat an Alabama? With the right team, maybe, but probably not.
Yeah, you never know, and that's one of those things where gimmicks and those kind of things are always fun. My favorite memory of trotting out any kind of gimmick was playing my cousin on Madden and bitch slapping him with the 72 Dolphins doing the run and shoot. He was not at all remotely ready for that. So
yeah, the wheel route, Hail Marys every play.
Yeah, exactly. That was the kind of stuff. The real Bob Greasy, gotta love him. And the Dolphins are my second favorite team. So the lineage of the Dolphins, including the perfect team, might have been before my time, but I still revere that team. But yeah, they were not running any of that kind of crap back in the day. But, in terms of, speaking of which, the NFL here, there's a couple of games, as we're looking at this and we're looking back, I wonder if these games in particular, there was 3 that jumped out at me, and I wonder if they do anything to kind of change the perceptions at this point as we look at the teams here. And again, overreactions after week 1, it's always real easy to do. But based on the performance of both teams in ththese 3 games, the first one being Green Bay and New Orleans, I was talking to a buddy of mine today who's an Aaron Rodgers fantasy owner. Now he's asking me, about, hey, well, maybe you're gonna have to trade me Sam Darnold off your bench at some point. I'm like, dude, we're a long ways away from that. I'd love to be able to hold you up for Sam Darnold, but Aaron Rodgers, I would think, again, to me, that was probably just a bad game. But again, and as we've talked about on this show previously, and Chris Galloway and I, when we did the divisional previews, not a very good team around Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they're kind of top heavy. It's a stars and scrubs kind of a deal to us. And looking at it here, and you saw the scrubs a lot more than you saw the stars on Sunday. New Orleans, and looking at that, they strike me as kind of much the same because the salary cap is starting to kind of pick them apart a little bit. But Winston went out there and made a believer out of me. I had New Orleans having a bad year, but I'm starting to think they could be at least a fringe playoff team based on what I saw there in that game. And like I said, with Green Bay, I really don't change my opinion at all that they win that division, if only by default. So do you come away looking at either of these two teams differently, Derek?
I do. I mean, I think it'd be wild to say Aaron Rodgers, there's no way he turns it around. But, he's dealing with his personal business getting aired out, somewhat of a laughing stock, I guess, if you have a more darker sense of humor. But everybody focusing on that, and also, obviously, professionally, everyone, the whole offseason being the biggest storyline, his drama with the head office. So maybe, that's going to really distract him, and maybe his head's not really in it. I don't know. I mean, I look at that game, and I don't know if we're going to see the Packers of last year. I think whereas last year Aaron Rodgers came in with something to prove, I don't think that's the case this year. I think he's distracted, and he doesn't have anything to prove now. Maybe this will set him off, but I don't know. The Saints, though, Jameis Winston he may have been, to quote Coach Green, that he may have been who we thought he was. That dominant player who just needed a little LASIK eye surgery, threw 30 touchdowns, 30 picks. He literally couldn't see. That was a joke of a storyline, but that may have been more true than what we believe. And if that's the case, that's insane. That's all it took. It was just sitting there. But I mean, between the Bears, and the rest of that division, I could see the Packers still winning it, but not really going anywhere in the playoffs. I mean, we're going to have half the league in the playoffs this year, so anything's possible. But there's not really a Super Bowl contender, I think, floating around in the wings. I mean, unless of course Justin Fields comes in and lights it up for the Bears, but I don't see that happening either. I think the Bears' defense is old. I think they're slow, and I think, the Bears. I mean, I know we're changing subjects now, but the Bears looked worse than I've ever seen them. I mean, just kidding. Granted, I'm a Matt Stafford believer, but that Bears defense was making some JV decisions out there.
Well, they were, and that's the thing. And I got to say, I have a tendency to stick to my guns on things even when they're unpopular. So I must admit that I identify as a Jared Goff truther. So I was a little bit skeptical of a lot of the hype here with Stafford coming into LA. But, I mean, he looked good there. I still think it's a real lack of character on the part of Sean McVay. And I was a Sean McVay day one guy, if only because I believe in bloodlines. And the family that he comes from, I thought it set him up for a good advantage. But, I mean, the way that he's just dumped on Goff ever since then, the new guy is so much better. I can't believe what a steaming pile of manure I had last year. But, I mean, hey, if you're a Stafford believer, I mean, game one makes you look good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of with Sean McVay here. I think Goff was kind of enabled by Gurley and his early success. I mean, when you have one of the top runners in the league on your team, I think you can be a system quarterback and just not make any mistakes. I think Goff is just, I never really saw anything there. Him, us playing him twice a year as a Cardinals fan. But I mean, before we get to the NFC West, and I know you want to talk about that, and I know I want to talk about that.
Sure.
I'd say my other big takeaway from this week one and early stupid predictions is the Alabama quarterbacks. I think those three, so, somewhat going back to college, but, Nick Saban churning out 3 quarterbacks in a row that are now starting in the NFL with Tua, Jalen Hurts, and Mac Jones, all having a really good performance. I mean, granted, Mac Jones' first game, I thought he looked better than, obviously Trevor Lawrence for sure. I think Jalen Hurts looked dominant. I was I remember when he came in for the first time against the Cardinals, he almost pulled an upset there. And then obviously you have Tua, who I think is starting to figure it out. But I think those three quarterbacks, the Bama three, are gonna do some damage this year. I think Patriots found their guy, and I'm not super high on Tua, but I do think he'll definitely be around the league for a while. But Jalen Hurts, I mean, he looked. I mean, I don't know if it was a really bad Falcons team, a really good Eagles team, but maybe a little both. But I think those three are going to be pretty dominant these next few years.
See, and I'm more skeptical on Hurts. I'm sort of more waiting for the other shoe to drop with him. With Tua, and again, like I said, the Dolphins are my 1A team historically, so I root for them whenever they're not playing the Brownies. But I've been saying, I think Tua, especially with the upgraded weaponry, look out for him, and I think he's living up to that a little bit. I will say, as far as it goes with Jared Goff and my Brownies going back to the 16 draft, that was a thing where I was trying to push the phrase in Cleveland, turn your head and cough for Goff, as I was hoping we would get the top pick. Because, again, I was very enamored, and FDH Lounge Dignitary Ben Chu, a.k.a. Ben the Skeptic, loves hammering me and poking holes in different things here. But like, Rick, you tend to fall in love with highlight videos. But, man, I'm telling you, Derek, if you've ever seen any of the highlight videos, the deep ball placement that guy had in college, I don't know what has happened subsequently, man, but I have rarely seen anybody coming out of school putting a deep ball down there on a dime like that guy did. That said, I still didn't think Detroit was going to go anywhere this year because, man, did they set him up for failure.
Yeah, no, I mean, Detroit's just a perennial. I mean, they're kind of becoming how the Browns were for a while there.
Yep.
But, I mean, before, the Browns, though, that was quite a game against the Chiefs. I think Mahomes and that team continues to be dominant. I mean, that's sort of kind of comparing it to the Cardinals as well with Kyler Murray. But these dynamic quarterbacks, I mean, you can just you're never out with Mahomes. I would kill to be, and we're kind of close with the Cardinals and having Kyler Murray on board. But Mahomes, you're never out with a guy like that. He is. I mean, I don't know how they pulled that off, but
it was painful. I will say, any one of four things doesn't happen, including Nick Chubb, for my money, the best running back in the NFL, fumbling, which he never does. But between that, Jamie Gillen having the brain fart on the punt, I mean, there was still room to punt when he was running it out there. People are going to point to Baker's INT on the last play, but you're going to have that particularly because he got hit as he was throwing it. And then, of course, everybody piles on John Johnson III, our wonderful new signing in the secondary there for the Hill touchdown where he was wide open. But it was probably Ward that was on him in the first place. Nobody talks about that part of it, and that the cornerback blew it just as badly. But any one of those four things doesn't happen, and the good guys probably hang on. But as I've been saying to people this week, I mean, super disappointed and a gut punch. But it doesn't move me off my prediction of a Super Bowl contender. I mean, you couldn't watch that game and not come away saying, damn, I don't want any part of these guys.
No, absolutely. I think it's going to be I think it is going to be a tough division. I think I would not take Cleveland as out of my playoffs for sure. I think they can make a run. I think Cincinnati, I think Burrow is going to have a great sophomore season. And it's that's going to be a pretty tough division there. And then obviously comparing it to the NFC West, which as happy as I am with my Cardinals and their performance, I think that division is going to be a juggernaut. I don't, and that's going to hurt us. I mean, the Niners looked awesome. Seattle, and obviously we talked about the Rams. So. I mean, has there been a playoffs with all four teams making it in a division? Because we may see that this year with the NFC West.
Well, yeah, it wasn't possible before last year, and now it'll be possible again this year with the permanent 14-team setup. I think it's entirely possible, and every one of those games in division is going to be must-see viewing. I will say that I had picked Arizona as a wild card team coming into the year, albeit before you get too enthused, Derek. Part of that comes from me sort of viewing the NFC as a hot circle of garbage, so to speak, albeit, again, my opinion of it is raised somewhat after this week and seeing some of the play out there. And in particular, Seattle, who I picked to be in last place, they certainly look better than I thought they were going to look. I continue to think they have more holes on defense than they're used to having, and I think that may come back to bite them at some point. And haven't had a good offensive line since grunge was in fashion, so, there's going to be some things that, are going to be rearing their head there with them, but that's a whole thing. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. Our two divisions, as far as which one's better, I would have said at the beginning of the year, by a razor's edge, the AFC North, because you mentioned the Bengals, and I think they are. I said before this weekend, I think they're a stealth playoff contender. Obviously, I'm a big Joe Burrow guy, as he's more or less an honorary Ohio Buckeye, or Bobcat, I should say. He was a former Ohio State Buckeye, of course, but sort of the honorary Bobcat. They even named the high school football stadium in Athens where I called games. They named that after him. So because of his Athens, Ohio ties. But beyond that, I'm a believer in what he's going to be able to do with that team. Baltimore, I think, takes a hit, and you saw it on Monday night. The running game, what they're going to do here, they've already lost their top two guys for the season. I already had the Browns, though, as the division champs even before that. I had Pittsburgh picked for last place, and that's a thing where, again, and that may very well still be the case, because I'm not a believer in Roethlisberger at this stage of his career.
Not at all.
The guy you saw down the stretch is the real guy, as opposed to the guy who was there for 11-0. So, honestly, because I still hold to my opinion of him, I think I now lean ever so slightly to the NFC West, because I had Seattle picked for last place in that division before this weekend, and if I'm right about that, they are way better than Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, I mean, Seattle. I just every year, especially as a Cardinals fan in that division, I wait for, this is the year Russell Wilson drops off. This is the year Russell Wilson drops off, and every year I just end up eating crow and hating my life watching him play, and we always tend to split games with Seattle. I do think that division, to both my, I guess, somewhat pride, and also to my, chagrin, as we have to play all these teams twice. I think the NFC West is easily the most dominant, and I'm gonna throw out almost a wild card here. I think the NFC South might sneakily be one of the better divisions. I think obviously Atlanta's trash, but and Carolina, though, I think Darnold found a better home there. And obviously we know Tampa, and we just talked about New Orleans, but I think Carolina might be a sneaky good team. I think Darnold was held back by Gase and the other shit show that's the Jets.
Yes.
But I see three really good teams there, and maybe Atlanta turns it around, but I don't know. We certainly, the NFC North's a joke now. And the NFC East, Dallas, I think, is going to have a resurgent year. And obviously, I'm high on Hurts and Philly, but, Washington, I thought they'd have a big year. They look terrible. The Giants, obviously, are the Giants. They're always terrible. But, no, I think there's a couple, besides the AFC North, I don't disagree with you. But I do think the NFC South is going to be up there as one of the more dominant divisions.
I agree with that in the sense that, again, like I said, I may have to do a reappraisal on New Orleans after what they did this weekend here. And I already was picking Carolina as a playoff team because, again, in addition to being a Jared Goff truther, and I tend to really hang on to my opinions, I'm a Sam Darnold truther. And Sam Darnold's actually the guy I wanted in the draft in 2018 for the Browns. And I was pretty pissed when they passed on him for Baker, albeit, obviously, I've since made my peace with it. But Darnold, yeah, and I'll tell you, Russ Cohen, Jets fan that he is, thought that it was justified to move on from him. I said, there should be a war crimes trial at The Hague for you guys ruining Sam Darnold, this precious jewel. To me, he was arguably maybe the best quarterback prospect to come out since Andrew Luck. That's how highly I had him rated. And I absolutely think that with Matt Rule in Carolina that he can get it turned around. So, I think that is something as well here, too. By the way, Russ Cohen's Jets, if not for them, I think we'd be putting the AFC East in the same conversation because Buffalo, and they showed it this week. I picked them to win the division, but I thought they were overblown as a Super Bowl playoff team, that people were saying Super Bowl contender. There's more holes on that defense than people think. It's certainly not a bad defense, but it's not impregnable the way everybody talks about. My Miami Dolphins are going to be right up there. New England doesn't have too many holes at the expense of a salary cap rampage that's going to cost them for years to come, but whatever, they filled most of their holes. The AFC East is probably in that conversation too, if not for the Jets, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. But I think that the Jets, I could see them being a mid-season surpriser. I'm not gonna, Robert Saleh. I think he's a phenomenal coach, great defensive mind, and I think being around that Niners team as well, I think he can turn around the Jets. So I'm not totally out on them, but obviously looking at them right now, they're definitely one of the weaker teams in the conference. But no, I do think the Patriots, between the Patriots, Buffalo, Miami, those are three really solid teams. I'm still waiting for the Belichick to, because I was when Brady left and everyone said, well, was it Belichick or was it Brady? I was always a Belichick guy. I was like, it's his coaching. He was what created the dominance that was the New England Patriots. But the last couple of years, I keep, Brady is making almost an ultimate argument that he was the dominant force and Belichick had nothing to do with. Maybe not nothing, but he was definitely not the catalyst.
Well, and you get to see them go head-to-head in the next couple weeks here. That'll be a Sunday nighter that NBC made sure to snarf up when they were doing the divvying out the schedule assignments here. So that'll be something that, it'll be 24/7 coverage on every channel, including probably the 3 news channels leading up to that game. And, so we have that to look forward to as we go along. But, a very, very eventful start to the season in college and NFL. Anything else that we didn't talk about yet in either one that catches you, Derek?
No, I mean, it's obviously week 1, so we're probably going to look in 10 weeks and be like, well, we were wrong on everything, or at least I'll say that.
Well, we'll see, and that's the joy of it too. No sense as I always say, for anything with me, any of my foibles, the price of a colorful life. So, if we got any of these things wrong, at least we took a swing at it and stuck our necks out there. But as I knew it would be, Derek, a joy to have you in here talking about this, and look forward to subsequent football conversations as we go along, my man. Thank you so much, and great job.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it, Derek. Thank you, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in to FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1370.